Last week, Jenny, Guy and myself read the Passion Gospel at St Michael's on Maundy Thursday. I've never actually done this before and I found it profoundly moving. The story took us on a journey with Jesus and his followers towards the cross and beyond, and to what appeared to be the end. The Passion Gospel left us at the tomb. The tomb was closed and there was no sign of life or hope. Because we live post-resurrection as such, we know that this is not the end. Out of this seemingly hopeless situation comes life, and we see the birth of something, the church. That which appeared to have died has come to life. Something more had come. This is the mystery of the cross and resurrection, suffering and hope. As I've been thinking about speaking today, I was reminded of a time a number of years ago when I went to a church on Easter Sunday, which held a party as part of the morning service. There were balloons, cakes and party poppers. And I remember struggling with this and not really getting what was going on. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to celebration or having a good time, but I felt its use in this way was not appropriate and minimised the Easter story. Yes, Easter is a cause for us to celebrate as such, but surely it is and has to be much deeper and richer than this. Thinking about that time brought back memories of my own journey of faith, and I am able to see how my theology and faith journey was in a time of transition then, as I sought to wrestle with the hard questions of life and felt there had to be something more than I was being offered within this particular thinking and theology. My journey for this something more was to take me to the depths of despair at times, where I not only doubted my faith, but seriously doubted my own mental health as well. I experienced a darkness that I never knew existed, but most of all, for a time, I lost hope in everything, which included God. However, it was only by experiencing this and going through it was I able to come out as such and to be honest about who I am and what I believe. And it was through this time of trial and suffering that I discovered life and liberation. Out of something which I feared had died came life. Something more had come. This is the mystery of the cross and the resurrection, suffering and hope. As many of you know, I worked at Whitechapel for a long time until recently. And during my time there, I journeyed with many people who have had many different issues, such as homelessness and addiction. And during my time there, many of people would say to me that I was an angel because I had managed to help them get a property or go into drug addiction treatment. And I know that I played a part in helping them to turn their life around and to go onto the road of recovery. Throughout my time at Whitechapel, my role was to address the issues. And whilst people knew that I had a faith and that I was a priest, discussions relating to faith and life in any depth was not what my role was about. However, a few months ago, I changed my job and I became chaplain to Merseycare. And I work on 7 acute mental health wards and 1 alcohol detox ward. I wear my collar each day and everybody clearly knows who I am. And my job is to work with colleagues to provide holistic care and support for people. My role is to care for the spiritual well-being of people. I really love this job, but it has not been without its challenges. I am often confronted with hard questions each day, and these are not wrapped in cotton wool in any way. And they are often asked within seconds of entering onto a ward, quite often by people that I don't really know. I am asked about evil and suffering, and especially when there is a news situation such as the recent plane crash, some people become fixated upon this, and this can mean they ask hard questions. If God is all-powerful, then why did he let this happen? Why do people kill? Why is the world such a mess? All I see is evil. The devil is in control of the world and me, and I cannot see the purpose of living, for I am living in hell. Last Thursday, Maundy Thursday, I sat with a young man who said to me, there has to be something more than this, surely something more than this suffering. This conversation and phrase, there has to be something more, has stayed with me as I have reflected upon Holy Week, Easter and this talk today. For I believe there is something more, and it is this that keeps me going in my life, in my work, and does, I feel, keeps humanity going. This belief that there is something more, that tomorrow can be different, that things can be better. And we as the church community see and experience this in our encounter with the Easter story, the hope of resurrection and life. I have been reading a book recently called From the Stars to the Street, and it's an engaged wisdom for a broken-hearted world. And the book talks about and explores what it means to have a spirituality of hope, which helps us to see and to focus upon a better future, even though we know there is suffering all around. On Good Friday, I was driving to St Michael's in the rain, and as I drove past the Everyman, I saw a man with plastic bags around him, asleep in a sleeping bag next to the wall, soaking wet. And as I saw this, I physically shouted out, "Dear God, what is going on? Dear God, help." And I felt a real sense of anguish and anger. Yet, as I drove home from the service later that morning, I saw a beautiful coloured bird, which I didn't know what it was at all, but it was lovely, in a garden near some daffodils, and I was reminded of life in all its glory. What a contrast. Within a short space of time, I had experienced suffering and hope, the cross and the resurrection. And also recently at work, we moved to a new hospital, and this is a brand new purpose-built hospital. And one of the wonderful things is that patients who are on a section are able to go outside into the garden area, which they weren't readily able to do in the last hospital. On that first day, I remember going outside with a young woman who'd been in hospital for a few weeks, and she hadn't been out very much. Together we stood in that garden area. We opened our arms wide and we said, we can see the sky. We can see the blue sky. This was deeply moving, and in that moment, looking at the sky, I believe she was able to experience wonder and to get a glimpse of what could be again. This did not mean that her suffering or her struggles ended, because that would be foolish and insensitive to think this. But in that moment, I believed she experienced hope. Suffering is not and can never be the last word. And the German theologian Moltmann said, "Death is in life's very midst, economic death of those who starve, political death of the oppressed, social death of those on the margins, the actual death of those killed by violence, war and bombs, those forced to live in poverty. And to accept this as being inevitable is to empty the resurrection of its power." So I am honest with people that I do not have any neat, tidy or easy answers to the many questions and situations that they present me with. I am honest that I too ask hard questions and lament over the suffering I see within our world. But what I do share is my belief that God is present with them, with me, with us, with his world. Fiona Castle, the wife of Roy Castle, said her husband received this short note during his illness. The lady wrote, "Jesus didn't come into the world to explain away suffering, but to fill it with his presence." And I believe this deeply. Last Thursday, Maundy Thursday, we held our weekly community service at the hospital for patients, staff, family and friends. We came together, each of us, with our own stories, our suffering and our hopes. And as we sat together in the stillness, I reflected upon the conversation I had had with that man earlier, who had said there had to be something more than suffering. And in that simple service of sharing bread and wine, of being in community together, I saw afresh how suffering and hope mysteriously comes together in Christ, in us, in each other, and here is the something more. Great is the mystery of faith. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. In our reading today, Mark tells us that the Sabbath is over. The women bring spices to anoint Jesus, and to their dismay, they find the tomb open. On Thursday at St. Michael's, we had been left with a tomb that was closed. Today, we are presented with a tomb that is open. The resurrection makes something more possible. It gives us hope for ourselves, for each other, and for this wonderful world that we have indeed been given.